I was just reading through the comments there that someone had left, and something popped into my head. Someone's said, I was talking about like Lovecraft. He was a magician, and this person wrote, "What are you saying that novels can be used as magical grimoires?" Absolutely, they can. Music can be used as magical grimoires, and this highlighted something about Crowley that was probably one of his failings. Is that he although he created modern Western culture as we know it today, like we wouldn't have rock music and so many other things if we didn't have Crowley, just that we probably wouldn't have things like role-playing games and all kinds of things, lost found footage movies if we didn't have Lovecraft. Crowley didn't seem to understand the power of pop culture, of modern culture. In terms of his magical workings, he was a strict Thelemite, and he was an adherence to the strict canon. The Book of the Law was called the Book of the Law for a reason. And any deviation from the law, he was not comfortable with. In fact, Jack Parsons was a member of the LA science fiction and fantasy writers, fantasy fans group. He was an active reader of science fiction and fantasy, and this would have been part of his rapport that he immediately had with L. Ron Hubbard. Now, L. Ron Hubbard maintains the official Scientology thing is that Hubbard was sent there by the U.S. Navy to spy on Parsons and his occult practices. I don't believe that at all. Hubbard was there for the same reason that Parsons was there, to practice magic. Now, one of the reasons the primary reason that Crowley ousted Parsons from the Thelemite Lodge in Hollywood, in LA, the Gape Lodge, was because they had performed a magical working based on Crowley's novel Moonchild. And Moonchild is a fantasy occult novel. So Parsons understood, because of his connection with science fiction, and absolutely he would have been aware of the work of Lovecraft. Of course he would have been. It was around that time in the mid-40s that Lovecraft's work was really starting to take off. But Parsons was an avid reader of weird fiction and science fiction and fantasy. It was around that time that things were changing, the post-war period, and the need for strictly adhering to books of magic ritual, such as the Book of the Law, the Rites of Elysium, and all the other things, the Bornless One, the Rite of the Headless One. All this stuff was becoming irrelevant because pop culture was becoming so enormous, and we were seeing the roots. That's what really Parsons and Hubbard were doing with Moonchild. They were opening up. They were the early explorers into the territory of chaos magic. Crowley was furious about this. He would call Parsons a simpleton and all this kind of thing, and eventually took him out of the leadership of the LA Lodge, the Thelemitic Lodge. And this is because Crowley failed to understand the power of pop culture. That's the irony of his work. Although he had been the engineer of this kind of pop culture, he would have disapproved of people like Parsons, like Hubbard, and later on people like Jimmy Page, because he would not have been able to understand initially, maybe, that like a Led Zeppelin concert was ultimately, as far as Page was concerned, a magic ritual. You can even see that in the movie The Song Remains the Same, how it's filmed and everything, the introductory scenes. And he wouldn't have been able to grasp Kenneth Anger's film Lucifer Rising, because it didn't adhere strictly to. In fact, Lucifer Rising could be seen as something of an intermediate between the old world of ritual magic and formal conduction of ceremonial magic, and the transition into the magic of the chaos magic that we have today. And yeah, that film Lucifer Rising is very much in that vein. It's a gateway between one form of sorcery and another. This is the thing, that we now live in an age where ritual magic doesn't really work, and ceremonial magic takes an enormous amount of energy that's ultimately wasted because energy can be procured in other ways. And we live in an age where magic is intuitive. It's much more. It's much more in the psychonautic aspects of free form, that literally you become magic. I couldn't imagine how Crowley would react to seeing things like memes and Keck and all that kind of thing. Unfortunately, it probably would have been lost on him, where someone like Parsons would have immediately have seen the power of that. So in many ways, Jack Parsons died for the magic system we have today. He sacrificed himself in the end. And even in the Moonchild working with Hubbard, looks like his fiery death with the rocket explosion was even foretold. He opened the gate, and I think, you look at the world today, Crowley opened the door, but he didn't furnish the room. The room was furnished initially by people like Parsons, and then later on the Chaos Magicians and all the other people within entertainment and art and music who actually carried the baton from that point forward. Yeah, so if they make another season of that series, Strange Angel, they finished the last one with a depiction of L. Ron Hubbard knocking at Parsons' front door. It will be interesting to see if they pull in Parsons' love and understanding that fiction is just as much of a grimoire as any kind of magical working, because ultimately it all derives from the same world of imagination.